Hello, welcome back to another tutorial. So, I received a wholesale order for some of my hand painted sketchbooks. So, I figured that I'd walk you through the process of me painting on the canvases. So, just a quick little bit of information. I don't know why I have this brush in my hand. A quick little bit of information. These canvases I just purchased on Amazon, and they are canvas panels. These are 4x6. They come in a variety of sizes. And the one thing, well, there are two things that specifically I look for. They can actually be any brand that you choose, but there are two things that I look for specifically when purchasing the canvas panels. One, that it's on 100% cotton, not paper, cloth, 100% cotton cloth canvas, and two, that it's primed. It doesn't have to be gessoed. You can purchase them gessoed. I prefer to just have them primed with, acid-free archival primer or whatever they use for it. But it should say acid-free and archival so that the canvas doesn't yellow. And then the first thing that I do, there are a couple of ways that I actually paint on canvases, but this is by far the easiest for galaxies. So the first thing that I do is I completely wet the canvas with a brush, making sure also to wet the sides because the canvas wraps around the cardboard that it's adhered to. So you want to get those edges so that the paint drips off of it. And since I get the edges wet, I always put a paper towel down so that it can catch any of the paint and the drippage, is that even a word, on it. Make sure to thoroughly wet it. And since this is going to be a galaxy, I want it to have nice flow to it. So making sure that you have enough paint or enough water on the canvas really helps with that. So for this order, for these orders, I should say, they asked for a ton of neutral galaxies. So very soft, neutral, like one color scheme type of galaxy. So for this one, I'm going to go with lavender. And this is going to be my first color. This will dry. Remember, watercolors dry a lot lighter than how they appear when you first put them down. Make sure that as you're doing it, you're also adding some water along the edges. And I'm also going to water it down. If your canvas is really flooded with water, you can pick it up and just allow the paint to kind of move on its own. But for now, I am just going to add some of this lavender to the sides, making sure that I also get the edges. And one thing that I will let you know about working on canvas is that once it dries, it's kind of a done deal. This is not like watercolor paper where you can get away with adding another layer once it dries. With the canvas, you cannot do that because it will automatically lift up the color that's already on the canvas. So no matter how light you go, no matter, if you go with a really, really light hand, it doesn't matter. It will lift up that color. So you'll see now I'm just tapping it in, and I'm going ahead and I'm painting this just the way that I usually do with most of my galaxies, but I'm making sure that the canvas stays wet at all times. Again, once it dries, the minute you put any water or anything on it, it will start lifting the paint. So I will take it and I will move that paint around. You're going to notice when you're working with canvas panels, the water stays on top. So you have big old puddles of water. And whereas with watercolor paper, you don't want that, I say it's okay to do that with canvas. Now I'm going in with my second layer and I am darkening up some of that color by just tapping it in. So there are still quite a few puddles on my canvas, and I will show you, you'll be able to see with the light. So even when you move it, all of that paint really does start to move right along with the water. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in a second color that's not too dark. So let's see which color. I think I will go with a little bit of antique pink because it has a little bit of a purple hue to it. Yep, and I think that will work really well with this. And I'm just going to add it in certain areas. I want to leave as much white as possible. So there's white here, there's white here, and I'm just going to tap it in just certain areas where I added that second layer just to give it like a little bit of an outline. And again, we're going to be using the tilting of the canvas to our advantage here. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. So I'm adding in a layer of the antique pink. Again, it has like a very purplish hue to it. And I'm going to pick up my canvas. Remember, the canvas is wet, so if you want to just pick up the paper towel and everything, feel free to do that. And I am going to let that flow just a little bit, not too much, but just enough to blend it in. Let me move this light out of the way for you. How about we put it over here? Just enough to blend it in. It's getting a little closer. And I'm going to add a bit more. I don't want to tilt it too much because I don't want this to completely cover the canvas. I want some of that lavender to show through. So I'm adding a bit here and there. I'm darkening the corners because I love to have dark corners in my galaxies. Darkening the corners up. Remember to catch the sides. Sometimes it'll just drip down on its own, but sometimes you'll need to encourage it a bit. So I like to just add some on the side. And I'm going to lift it up and manipulate that just a little bit. Not too much. Okay. I'm going to get rid of some of this excess water on the side. So what I'm going to do is make it all run down to the corner and then pick it up with my paper towel. All right, let's add a little bit more depth, not too much more, because they want nice, soft, neutral galaxy. So we're not going to do too much more, but just enough to give it a little bit more depth. So I'm going to add it in. Maybe this time I'll also go back to the lavender and I'll plop some lavender on the edges of where I plopped the antique pink so that those could blend in a little bit more seamlessly. Let's pick it up again and blend that in. So you're not blending it in with your brush, you're blending it in by tilting your canvas. And I think we are done with this. This is going to be a nice, light, neutral galaxy. So let me put these back in my tin. And all right, let's put these back in the tin. And now we are going to dry them. So, actually, before we dry, I am going to grab a little bit of my Copic Opaque White, and with a smaller brush, I'm going to go ahead and use a size 2. I'm going to wet that, dip it in the white, and I'm going to tap in some of that white, and you'll see what's going to happen when we dry it. So I'm going to concentrate some of that white in certain areas, and leave it at that. Let's dry this off. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to grab a heat gun. I'm going to grab my old hair dryer. A heat gun tends to dry the canvas way too fast in certain areas, instead of giving me a nice like even coverage or a nice even dryness. I don't know how to say it, but a hair dryer, since the nozzle or the opening is a lot bigger, tends to give me a more even coverage when I'm drying it. So that's what we want. Also, you want to hold the hair dryer far away from not, you don't want to get too close. You want to get, it looks pretty near close to it on camera, but I guarantee I can tell you it's about 12 or so inches away. So yeah, between like 12 and 15 inches away, so that you don't burn any one spot. And we're gonna go ahead and dry it. One thing you're gonna notice when you dry it is that as the air hits it, the water and the paint tend to move. So it's okay if that happens, kind of go with it. If you don't want it to, just try to get it back into place. But you're going to get a lot of smoothing out of any of these rough patches just by drying it. Okay, and now that our canvas is dry, you'll see that after I added the white drop, after I tapped in the white to the wet canvas, it gave me like this snowy, staticky type of texture. Instead of giving me, it gave it to me in some areas. So it gave me like bright white spots in some areas. But for the most part, it gave me these like snowy, let's see if I can zoom in here. It gave me like these snowy texture, sort of like when you put salt on watercolor paper and let it dry that way. That's sort of what the white does on a canvas. So we're going to use that to our advantage. First thing we're going to do now that this is completely dry is I'm going to add a bit more white. And I'm using a small brush because I want it to have like, you know, really small droplets of white instead of bigger ones. Trying to keep this as simple as possible. And now I am going to go and grab a liner brush. So this is a size 0. And this is going to give me the thinnest lines possible. And I'm going to add a couple of stars, just really, really soft and really, really subtle. Let's put this aside. And right along one of those patches, like that look like little snow droplets that I added with the white, I'm gonna take a couple of those, and right in the center of them, I am going to do a really thin star. It's going to be very, very subtle and very thin, because we're doing a very subtle light galaxy. One thing that I have found when working with a liner pen and working with the Copic opaque white is that you want your liner pen to be fairly wet. Because they tend to dry out. So I add water and I try not to get rid of too much water off of my brush so that it could flow better instead of skipping along the canvas. So we have that there. Let's add one more. We'll add one more. How about right here? Just very thin and very soft and subtle. Whoa, that I added too much. But I mean, that is the story of my life, right? Okay. And now I'm going to add just a little hint of a moon. Nothing too big, nothing too fancy. Let's do a little crescent moon. Too much water on my brush. So let's pick that up. And we're going to add a little crescent moon right over here. Actually, let's make it a full moon instead of a crescent moon. We'll do a nice full moon there. And I'm going to add in a little bit of the purple just to give the moon a little bit of texture. And you can feel free to add more to this, but they want it nice and subtle and nice and soft, so I am going to keep it like this. And with that, we are done. You can, so the first time that I used these canvases, I didn't seal them. Then I realized that, you know, even just a little drop of water can mess with the paint. So I have started to seal my canvases with an acrylic sealer. So it's just a spray acrylic sealer. You can use like the Mod Podge acrylic sealer or any other acrylic sealer you have. They work well on this and it doesn't have like a whole lot of shine. If you use the Mod Podge one, here, I'll show you. If you use the Mod Podge one, use the Mod Podge matte clear acrylic sealer and it'll dry matte. And I usually put 2 to 3 coats on it, and then yeah, we are good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one.